What is going on, everyone? Welcome to ToyShopFab. Today we are working on my homemade, home-built Crosskart off-road buggy I call Frankenstein. I call it Frankenstein because of all the different parts it's made of. We've got a little bit of a Chevy Suburban. We've got some Yamaha Banshee. We got a Suzuki engine. Just a lot of things that I have found around the place, got off eBay. So, anyways, last video we did on this, we got our floor, so you can see there, out of old street signs. We got a floor installed on this thing, secured our brake line, and also got our heat exchanger for our intercooler all buttoned up, got fluid running through that. So, what I figured I would do today is, well, I've got a lot of the controls bouncing around all over the place, and I've already gone ahead and kind of cut and extended and mounted one guy already, and that is this guy right here. Here's our start button. We've got our start and kill, or run and kill switch there. Figured the best place to put it is on the shifter. If I ever get in any kind of situation where I need to, I can always reach over and just hit it. My hand doesn't have to come off the shifter. I've got a hold of something. That's where it is. Start button is right here. These little wires are for the factory front brake. I think I'm gonna, I've got an idea of what I want to use these for. I'm not 100% sure I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna go ahead and leave these here. But these were hooked to the factory front brake lever that would have come on the bike that all this came out of. So we're gonna leave those there. I have cut and just kind of secured our harness, or extended the harness there. That way it could be mounted to the shifter and have everything right here. What I want to do is I've also gone ahead and made this little plate that goes right here underneath our steering wheel. And I've undid our factory key switch. Now what I want to do is mount that guy down in here. Now I know it's gonna be kind of a tight fit, but you don't need the key to start it. I just have to reach down and turn it on. All my other controls are gonna be outside, easily accessible. So I'm just gonna put this down on that plate, get it mounted out of the way. That way it has the key and it's not bouncing around on the seat or hanging off, or it's secure. So also, after I do that, I am going to cut this harness and extend it as well, get it plugged back into everything. And this guy here is it's 5 wires. We've got you can see the 2 bigger, the red and the orange, and then we've got 3 smaller ones. We've got gray, brown, and orange as well. And each one of those have its tracer, so the wires will be easily identifiable once I cut and extend this thing. But first things first, get you guys in the stand. I'm gonna go ahead and get this steering wheel back out of my way. We'll get the placement for our ignition switch marked. That way I can pull this seat, get in here, get everything cut and mounted up. So get you in the stand, and here we go. All right, our ignition switch is mounted up in the Crosskart. You saw I took the seat out, took some measurements, used a step bit to make a big enough hole to put our switch through our little panel, and then screwed itself back together. It's held together by itself. I just took this little guy out from the center, and you can see, I mean, these things are held together using just these little security bits. And if you need something like that, you can actually get that from Harbor Freight. That's where I got that kit. So just took the switch apart, made the hole, and then screwed the switch all back together. So now it's holding itself in place on our panel. Now what I'm going to do is we need to lengthen our harness, because obviously this guy He's stuck. He's not going to be able to make it back to this guy up here. So I've grabbed some wire that I had laying around. Of course, we're using the big red, and I've got the big orange, or the larger gauge orange wire for the 2 larger gauge wires on the switch. And I do have a bunch of this smaller wire. No, it's not going to match the existing wires that are in this harness, but that is all right. I'm just going to cut the harness probably 2 or 3 inches from the end of this little guy here, and then make a note, and we're going to solder each one of these wires back together using this stuff here. Now just make a note, if you got a notepad or something, or a build sheet, if that's what you're doing. If your memory isn't the greatest in the world and you don't remember, just write it down like you used white to extend the orange with yellow tracer, or pink to extend the brown with silver dots. You know, something like that. That's what I do. I don't usually have the same color wires laying around. I just try to make a note of what I did to extend a harness, if that's what I did. So, and then we're just going to solder it back together. You don't have to solder it. I like soldering, especially if I'm going to put a loom over it to help cover it up, make it look all uniform. But if I do recommend, if you don't solder and you use butt connectors, use a heat shrink over a butt connector, or the those butt connectors that have the built-in heat shrink. And there are those other ones out there too. If you heat them up, they heat shrink, solder, all that stuff. If you can get a hold of those will work pretty good as well. So, but I'm going to get you in the stand here. I'm going to go ahead and just cut what's left of this covering off this harness right here, so we can cut here or here, somewhere in there, strip all the wires back. I'll get you in the stand, go through most of it as you guys are watching on this time lapse, and then right before I finish, we'll go ahead and just kind of go through how I do it. You know, it may be the same, it may help some of you guys out, or it might make it a little clearer for you. But anyways, like I said, I'll get you in the stand. We're going to time lapse going through most of this. Here we go. All right, down to the final wire of our loom. So, most important thing you want to do is remember, if you're soldering, to put your heat shrink on first, because it's really, really hard to put a heat shrink on after you've already soldered. So make sure you got that. All right, now here is what I do. Like I said, here is our last wire. I've got this pink wire here. It's going to the brown. I know which color is which. So, but anyways, what you want to do, or what I do, is you take your wire, especially the small ones, and you give it about, you trim the cover back about 1/2 inch or so, maybe a little over 1/2 inch. Twist your wire up, and I like to bend it in half so it's like a little hook. Do that to both sides. Get it twisted up. Bend it in half just like that. That way you can take your 2 wires here and they will hook together just like so. After you got them hooked, close that little hook up and give it a good little, just give it a nice little twist to kind of help lock that in place. The most important thing I have found over the years is you want your wires to have a fairly good mechanical connection as well as a solder connection, because this is pretty tight, and after you solder it, it'll hold on just fine. But if for any reason it gets hot or whatever, then the two don't want to slip apart. So that's why I like or found that it's very, very important to have a good mechanical connection. So we got that guy going right there. I'm gonna go ahead and just solder it. I've got one of these, you pick them up at your hardware stores. I've had this one for many, many years. This is a like 100 universal 140, 100 watt. Yeah, I've had it for a really long time actually. And I just use old Radio Shack 6040 rosin core solder. Had this for a really, really long time too. I'm gonna go ahead and just solder this joint together. I've also found it important too, if you got a brand new tip, make sure you get it tinned, get it heated up, get some solder on that guy. Now, some people will have a sponge next to it to wipe it off or whatever. Right before, like right after I release the trigger, I will flick mine, and it pretty much throws any excess off. Now, if you're doing it in your house, you don't want to do that, use a sponge. But since I'm out here, I just flick it, gets most of the excess solder off. That way you don't get a bunch of buildup on the end of your solder gun. But go ahead and solder this guy up. Now, a good solder joint is you're going to see as the solder will run into the wire. It won't build up around it. You'll see it kind of like welding. It'll just like puddle into your wires. Let's see here if it'll focus for you. But you can see it's not built up. The solder went all the way to pretty much the end of each core there. It just kind of melted in. That's another reason why I like using this smaller, this smaller wire, 6040. It heats up quick, because if you use really thick solder, then you're going to risk overheating the wire. It changes the resistance of the wire. Small wire, small solder, it heats up fast. It pours in fast. Doesn't take a whole lot of heat. So if you're using big solder, then you're going to be there for a long time. Get this stuff, it melts quick. It pours into the wire. So once you got that in soldered, go ahead and just pull. Rub your finger across it too. I like to do that as well, because if there's any sharp edge from where your mechanical connection was at, you can take your little strippers or your pliers and just kind of push that down. Turn it into not a pokey spot. I know there's another word for that, but I don't. And then rub your finger across it again. Once you don't feel that sharp edge anymore, then you should be fine. It's not going to want to poke through the heat shrink after it shrunk. So go ahead and run this guy over. And I just use a regular old heat gun. Some people use lighters. I like the heat gun. I feel I have more control. This is just something from my Harbor Freight store. And it also helps to plug it in. So now, put that wire over there. And there you can see wires connected, heat shrunk is on. Now, if you're new, you see I run this it's a cheaper covering, it's a cheaper loom cover or whatever. It does fray a little bit if you cut it, no big deal. If you're new, or the guys that have been with me for a while know that I like to use heat shrink to secure the loom, and I'll throw it on first, then work the loom on and move this around where I need it. But once everything is said and done, you can take pretty much where it's all frayed, trim it back a little bit. I just use a pair of scissors. I know I had, oh, there they are. So I'll just trim this back a little bit real quick. Just makes it easier. Run your loom all the way up, kind of tighten it up. See here, you can see how the loom is kind of moving. It's tightening up. It's moving back up to this guy here where it's supposed to be. You can take this, just run it down, and then it picks up the loom. See? Really neat how this stuff works. And then you just take it, put the loom where you want, basically right here where my connections are at, and then you can bring your heat shrink up. Cover up all your little fray marks. You can move this down a little bit. Oops. There we go. Trim this back just a little bit more. Okay, so now we got our heat shrink and our loom moved all the way up where it's supposed to be. Grab your heat gun. Just run it over the heat shrink. Try to keep it off the bottom side of the heat shrink because this is like a nylon loom. This heat gun will melt it, so take your time on any of that stuff actually, but just take your time. Alright, got that guy in place, everything is good to go. So now you can see we have our harness from our key all lengthened. And like I said, it doesn't have to all be the same color wire. Just leave yourself enough room at each end of the harness or the pigtail, whatever connection it is you're doing. If you have to use like a multimeter or something, go from one spot to the next. It'll at least help you identify which wire is which, even though all the wires in the center may be a different color. So now we got that. I'm gonna go ahead and run it underneath our floor here. Plug it back into the original harness of the motorcycle. Let's see. All right, so that is plugged in. Now let's see if I got any power. Let's see here. See if we got any power in the key. Battery is dead, so let's shut that off. Grab my jumper box really fast. All right, got the jumper box. We'll have to get a new battery for this thing pretty soon. Oop. There's red, there's black. Jumper box is on. Go ahead, turn it on. All right, let's test our key again. Yep, so power's on. Got, as As you can see, our cluster is now powered up. There's our key down here in the center. You can see off the back of our ignition switch, runs under, on the floor, back up around our little water pump for our intercooler, and then plugs back into our factory harness. Now I did that one the other day, like I said, brought it all the way over to the shifter. So if I hit this button, and that button kills it. So run, hear the fuel pump, start, power off. Now our key is off, gauge is off, and everything is working. So where I cut, our ignition switch works, everything was brought back, everything's been soldered up and heat shrink. Now, like I said before, you don't have to solder it. You can use those heat shrink with the solders or just regular butt connectors, but try to have something that'll keep the moisture out of each one of your connections. Granted, most of these plugs, even the ones I've done, aren't really weather packed. I'll try to wrap them with something, but everywhere I soldered or anything that I have cut apart and touched so far has had heat shrink and some kind of try to protect it from the weather. Another thing you want to remember too, if you're not going to solder and you're going to use those connectors, stagger your cuts. Don't put them all in the same plane, because once you're done, you're going to have a really big lump, and it's going to be kind of hard to put a loom over it, unless you just go up in front or before that. But then you're going to have a big wad of butt connectors. So if you're going to use them, just go like a little bit, like 1.5 lengths of each one of the connectors. So you got a connector, go bottom of that connector, half plus half, put one there, bottom plus half, put one there. Give yourself enough room that way it helps keep your loom nice and somewhat tight. But so that's what we've got on Frankenstein so far. I know this video is going to seem kind of short, not a whole lot of meat in it right now, but like I said, like I have mentioned in another video, I am still covering for my vacation that I took. Didn't have a whole lot of time here at the house to get a whole lot that I wanted to get done, but I still wanted to do something and just move a little bit more, move a little farther forward on this project. It doesn't have to be big chunks all the time. It could be something small. Like now that I've got this part of the harness, this part is done. I just got to move on now to the other little side controls, figure out where I want to mount that, make a bracket to mount this guy up in here so we can see it. But like I said, just chip out of the way a little at a time. Take your time, have fun with it. Don't get rushed and stuff like that. So, but anyways, that's where I'm at with this thing right now. Like I said, hopefully I should be back home within a couple of weeks, which maybe a couple days after you see this video. It's always funny when I say that. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. Get out there, work on your projects, have fun, make progress, and just enjoy it. So, but anyways, guys, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Hope I motivated you to get out there and work on your stuff. Have fun. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. Share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't already and you've made it this far. So again, you guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. And I'll catch you on the next one.